Welcome to the Sustainable Development Goals and People. In this block, we're going to look at the 5 Sustainable Development Goals that are related to the theme of people. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, and gender equality. For each of the SDGs, we're going to look at the underlying principle. We're going to overview some key statistics and facts. We'll have a look at the targets in each goal, and we will also look at the indicators of some of them, which are there to track progress. We'll start off by looking at SDG 1, no poverty. The underlying principle of this SDG is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. More than 4 years of progress against poverty has been erased by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we're all familiar with the fact that COVID has been much more severe, or the impacts of COVID have been much more severe on those who are less fortunate and who don't have access to resources. Rising inflation and the impacts of war in the Ukraine have further derailed the process. We're now looking at a current projection of 676 million people living in extreme poverty in 2022. This is up from 581 million prior to the pandemic. Working poverty rate has risen for the first time in 2 decades from 6.7 to 7.2 million. This is pushing an additional 8 million workers into poverty, so the working poverty rate is people who are working and still in poverty. Unemployment cash benefits during the pandemic were quite unevenly distributed. Of course, in high-income countries, over 52% of people received some supports. In low-income countries, that was as low as 0.8%. Disaster-related deaths rose 6-fold in 2020, largely as a result of the pandemic. All of the statistics that we present to you here are from the UN Statistics website, which you can see links to on the web page. So, the SDG 1, no poverty, has 7 targets, and we'll have a look at these now. Target 1.1, by 2030 to eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. $1.25 a day, that's a very small amount of money. If you think about the amount you spend yourself, even on a cup of coffee. In 2021, an estimated 698 million people, or 9% of the global population, are living in extreme poverty. Target 1.2, by 2030 reduce at least by half the population of men, women and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions, according to national definitions. What is poverty? Poverty can be defined in numerous ways. Globally and internationally, they define it using the amount of dollars you have access to per day. The previous slide talked about extreme poverty, $1.25. Here we're talking about the next line, which is $3.20. It's estimated that over 1/5 of the global population live on less than $3.20, and over 2/5 live below the $5.50 mark. Is aiming to reduce by half this, is the target here enough, do you think? Target 1.3, implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. A social protection floor is a nationally defined set of basic social security guarantees that secure protection aimed at preventing poverty. It seems to be very unfair that children born in one country, in certain countries, can be so disadvantaged compared to children born in other countries. That's why these Sustainable Development Goals are so important. Target 1.4. By 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology, and financial services, including microfinance. Quite a long sentence, but the meaning of it is really very significant. Ensure that people who are poor and vulnerable have equal access to economic resources, many of which we take for granted. If you're born into a poverty situation without access to resources, it's impossible to get out of the poverty trap. So, ensuring that people get opportunities and access to these resources is absolutely essential if we are serious about reducing poverty. By 2030, build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations and reduce their exposure and vulnerability to climate related extreme events and other economic, social, and environmental shocks and disaster. Clearly, again, we must support those who are poor and have less access to resources if we are serious about trying to get rid of poverty as an international problem. We have already seen the statistics telling us that COVID pandemic has caused poverty increase of 50 million. And as I mentioned earlier, the poor and the vulnerable are always most at risk. If you have access to financial resources, you have some possibility of cushioning yourself, but if you don't have anything. Target 1A, ensure significant mobilization of resources from various sources, including through enhanced development cooperation, to provide adequate and predictable means for developing countries, in particular least developed countries, to implement programs and policies to end poverty in all its dimensions. Again, it's about providing access to resources for the appropriate people and for the appropriate agencies and countries. I wonder, are you aware that Ireland's development cooperation programme supports long-term development and provides humanitarian assistance in over 80 countries? As an individual, do you know what part you can play in that? Hopefully, when we get into detail in this in the unit, in the SDG 1 unit, you will get a better overview of what is being done about it internationally, what we're doing about it in Ireland, and how you can help and get involved yourself. Target 1B, create sound policy frameworks at the national, regional, and international levels based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive development strategies to support accelerated investment in poverty eradication actions. Many global statistics do not provide clear data on gender-sensitive issues, but it is known that women are overrepresented in the numbers quoted for global poverty. This goal is about developing strategies that will work. We all need to work together to achieve those. So there you have 7 targets to achieve no poverty and a number of indicators. There is poverty in Ireland, more than we sometimes like to admit, but there is extreme poverty worldwide. So I think it's up to us going forward to try and do what we can to ensure that there is a future without poverty.